Wyndham Clark's name hit every golf headline this week, and not because of a birdie. A private ban from Oakmont Country Club, the kind of thing that stays behind closed doors, got dragged into the open. No laying up broke the story. Clark went public and pointed the finger at Tron by name. That leak cracked open something that had been building for 3 years, and now 5 voices inside the tour are demanding the USGA take back what they gave him. 2 US Open trophies, 1 career defined by them, and a clip from 2023 that refuses to die. The drop on 17, the grass moving under his hands. The USGA reviewed it, said nothing, and let the trophy stand. Every time Clark won, every time he lost his temper, that footage crawled back into the conversation. Oakmont was supposed to end it. A private punishment. A quiet ban. Instead, someone talked, and the whole tour heard. What the USGA does next could rewrite how golf handles its own champions. Clark missed the cut at Oakmont by 1 stroke. 1 stroke. He walked into that locker room carrying the weight of a major title defense falling apart, and what he did to that 100-year-old locker became a bigger story than the leaderboard. Oakmont sent a letter to their members, banned him from the property. Done. Closed. Except it was not closed. Someone handed that letter to a podcast, and Clark found himself fighting on 2 fronts. The fans who already doubted his 2023 win. The media he accused of selling him out. Players who used to share a practice green with him, quietly wondering whether 2 US Open trophies belong to a man who cannot control what happens after the round ends. Personally, I think Clark has been punished enough by the court of public opinion. Do you agree, or should the USGA step in? Let me know below, and hit subscribe before this story gets buried. 5 players put their names to a demand that could change how major championships are policed forever. To understand why 5 players would go public with something like that, you have to go back to Los Angeles Country Club, June 2023. Clark was 29, playing in his first US Open as a genuine contender. He shot the lights out, one by one, held the trophy, cried for his late mother. The whole golf world celebrated with him. Then the clip started circulating. The 17th hole. Clark's ball found trouble. He took a drop, standard procedure. Except frame by frame, you can see his hands near the grass before he releases the ball. Moving something. Improving the lie. Rule 8.1 says you cannot improve the conditions affecting your stroke. You cannot move, bend, or break anything growing or fixed. The footage made it look like he did exactly that. The USGA reviewed it. No penalty. The trophy stood. Clark walked away clean. 9th hole. Same tournament. Another drop. Another angle that looked wrong. Same review, same result. Nothing. Golf fans do not forget. They bookmark. They screenshot. They repost. Every single time Clark stepped into the spotlight after that, someone dragged those clips back into the light. A bad lie at the Masters. A heated exchange with a referee. A driver thrown into the dirt. Each incident fed the same narrative. The 2023 win was dirty, and the USGA looked the other way. Clark never addressed the footage directly. Not once. No press conference. No Instagram post. No interview where he sat down and said, "Here is what happened on 17." That silence became its own evidence in the court of public opinion. You do not stay quiet about something unless it is true. That is what people told themselves. Fair or not, that became the story. The USGA closed the file in 2023. What happened 12 months later at Oakmont made it impossible to keep that file closed. By the time Clark arrived at Oakmont for the 2025 US Open, the doubt had hardened into something uglier. Fans did not just question his swing anymore, they questioned his character. They questioned whether a man who might have cheated his way into a major championship deserved to walk the same fairways as players who earned it clean. Every clap from the gallery sounded forced. Every silence felt pointed. Clark played those first 2 rounds under a microscope that no amount of talent could escape. He missed the cut by 1 stroke, and what happened next turned a quiet suspicion into a fire that 5 players are now demanding the USGA put out. The locker room at Oakmont is not some generic gym-changing area. It is one of the oldest and most respected locker rooms in American golf. Century-old wood, brass nameplates, a place where legends have dressed for decades. Clark walked in after signing his card, missed the cut by that single stroke, and took it out on the first thing in front of him. He went after a locker, not his own. A 100-year-old piece of Oakmont history, damaged it badly enough that the club took notice, took action, wrote a letter to their members explaining what happened and what they were going to do about it. Wyndham Clark was banned from Oakmont Country Club, not suspended for a tournament, banned from the property. Period. That letter was supposed to stay inside those walls. A club matter, a private disciplinary action between a member institution and a player who crossed a line. Nobody outside Oakmont needed to know. Clark would serve his ban quietly, the story would fade, and the next tournament would bury it. Except someone talked. No laying up got the story. Tron specifically. The details of the ban, the letter, the damage, all of it hit the golf internet like a grenade. Clark found out the way most players find out their private business is now public. Through his phone blowing up. He went nuclear. Named Tron by name. Called out, no laying up. Accused them of selling his privacy for clicks. Made it personal. Made it ugly. Took it public. That was the moment this stopped being about a locker. Clark turned a private punishment into a public war. On one side, a two-time major champion accusing golf media of betraying him. On the other, journalists saying the public deserved to know what happened inside a club that hosts the US Open. Both sides had an argument. Neither side backed down. The golf world picked a side based on whether they already believed Clark was guilty or innocent. Fans who doubted his 2023 win now had a second reason to distrust him. First the footage, then the locker, then the refusal to apologize, then the attack on the media. Each layer stacked on top of the last, until the narrative was no longer about one bad round or one bad night. It was about a pattern. A man who could not control himself when the cameras were off, and who blamed everyone else when they turned on. Inside the ropes, 5 players watched all of this unfold, and for the first time, they stopped staying quiet. The tour locker room is not supposed to be a courtroom. Players do not put their names on petitions. They do not record statements demanding action from the USGA. They play, they shake hands, they move to the next event. So when 5 of them broke that code, it meant the Clark situation had crossed a line that even professional courtesy could not cover. These were not fans posting on Reddit. These were not journalists chasing clicks. These were men who had shared ropes, practice rounds, and Ryder Cup team rooms with Clark, and they decided his behavior had become a problem for the entire tour. Their demand, and the timing behind it, is where this story stops being about one player's temper and starts being about the future of major championships. The first voice came from the broadcast booth. Kevin Kisner, former PGA Tour winner, now an analyst for NBC, went on air and blamed the USGA for making Clark's situation worse. Not Clark. The USGA Kisner argued that the governing body had backed Clark into a corner, let the media circus grow, and then acted surprised when he snapped. That comment landed hard. Other players heard it, agreed privately, started repeating it in smaller rooms, in group chats, in conversations with reporters they trusted. The second voice came from the journalists who covered the Oakmont leak. They began asking a harder question. If a player can damage property at a major championship venue and face zero consequences from the USGA, what message does that send to every other player on tour? The argument was not about Clark specifically. It was about precedent. If the USGA does not act here, they will never act. That silence, those journalists argued, is worse than any punishment they could hand down. Then the third voice arrived, and it was louder than the first two combined. The fans organized. Not a hashtag, something more pointed. They compiled every piece of footage, every outburst, every skipped interview, every hostile crowd moment, and packaged it into a single argument. Wyndham Clark does not represent what the US Open stands for. They sent it to the USGA directly. Thousands of signatures, thousands of comments, a demand wrapped in the language of tradition and honor, the kind of language the USGA cannot ignore without looking like they do not care about their own championship. The fourth voice came from inside the ropes. Players who had been on the receiving end of Clark's temper during practice rounds, verbal exchanges near scoring areas, moments that never made the news because they happened behind the scenes, away from cameras. One player described being yelled at over a perceived slow play issue on a practice green. Another recalled Clark slamming a club into the ground inches from a caddy's feet during a Wednesday round. These players did not go public. They went to their agents. Their agents went to the tour. The tour went to the USGA. Quietly, professionally, firmly. The kind of pressure that does not make headlines but changes decisions in boardrooms. The fifth voice was the loudest because it said nothing at all. The USGA itself. Their silence after Oakmont, after the leak, after Clark's public attack on the media, became a statement of its own. Players read that silence as complicity. Fans read it as cowardice. The media read it as a story waiting to break. Everyone was waiting for the USGA to speak. They did not. Not one statement. Not one press conference. Not one line addressing whether Clark's behavior had consequences beyond a private club ban. No meeting was called. No review was announced. The file stayed shut while the noise outside grew louder every single week. Then Clark showed up at Shinnecock Hills for the 2026 US Open, and everything the USGA had been avoiding came crashing down on the first tee. Clark arrived at Shinnecock as a villain. The New York crowd did not care about his apology. They did not care about the mental coach he hired to prepare for the hostility. They did not care that his late mother's mantra was tattooed on his arm. They cared about the locker, the footage, the silence. The arrogance they saw in every interview where Clark refused to address 2023 directly. The first round was a war. Fans jeered him mid-swing. Police removed hecklers from the gallery. Security escorted him between holes. One group near the fifth tee was ejected after screaming during his backswing 3 consecutive times. A beer cup landed near his bag on the 12th fairway. Clark did not flinch, did not look up, shot a 6 under 64 anyway. The best round of the tournament. Played like a man who had decided the only answer to noise was score. By Sunday, the crowd had not softened. His lead made them louder. They wanted him to fail. They wanted the narrative to hold. Clark held off Sam Burns by 1 shot, made a circus birdie on 16 that will be replayed for years, walked up 18 with the lead, the hate, and the weight of 2 years of controversy on his shoulders. 40,000 people watching. Some cheering, most not. Every step toward that green was a referendum on whether he deserved to be there. He won, wire to wire, his second US Open trophy. At the ceremony, he held the trophy, looked at the crowd, and said 3 words that broke the story wide open. New York didn't really like me. Then he apologized, not for winning, for the locker, for the silence, for the way he had handled everything since 2023. It was the most honest moment of his career. Paige Spiranak defended him publicly. Jack Nicklaus said he understood the toughness it took. The golf world exhaled. Clark's apology changed nothing, because the 5 voices had already made their demand, and the USGA could no longer pretend this was about one player's bad week. Here is the answer. The USGA will not strip Wyndham Clark's US Open trophies. Not the 2023 win at Los Angeles Country Club. Not the 2026 win at Shinnecock Hills. The footage from 2023 was reviewed in real time by officials on the ground. No penalty was assessed. The USGA does not retroactively strip a major championship based on fan footage that was already examined and cleared. The locker room incident happened after the round ended. It has no bearing on the score. There is no mechanism in the rules of golf to revoke a major title based on off-course behavior, no matter how damaging the footage, no matter how loud the demand. The 5 voices do not represent a formal institutional challenge. They represent public opinion. The USGA operates on rules, not outrage. They will not act because a podcast leaked a letter. They will not act because fans organized a petition. They will not act because Kevin Kisner disagreed with their handling of the situation. They will act only if new, definitive evidence emerges that changes the factual record of the tournament itself. Evidence that proves, beyond any doubt, that a rules violation occurred during the round and was missed by officials in real time. That has not happened. It is not going to happen. Clark keeps his trophies. Both of them. The US Open will not take them back. Both trophies stand, but the asterisk does not. That is the reality golf has to live with now. Clark has 2 US Open titles. The footage exists. The locker happened. The crowds turned on him. He won anyway. The USGA let the trophies stand because the rules say they must. The fans did not let the story die because the internet says they cannot. The players did not let the locker room forget because the code of the tour says they should not. So who really lost here? Clark, who will carry the question mark for the rest of his career. The USGA, whose silence cost them credibility with the very fans who fund their championships. The 5 voices, who demanded action and got none. Or the game itself, which asked for honor and got a locker room argument instead. The trophies are in Clark's house. The footage is on the internet. The question is in your hands. Who do you think really lost? Let me know below. Subscribe if you want the next chapter, because this story is not finished. It is just waiting for the next leak.